economic policies. People during all this time have been fighting against the practices given the government, the IMF, civil rights and social welfare, Syriza moved from the faulty anyway partial debt cancellation to payment extension. And while voters of Syriza see the European Union leading the way in austerity along with the IMF, Syriza leadership insists on no exit from European Union and Eurozone. As an example of this turn towards the right, during his visit in the United States of America, the president of Syriza, Alexis Tsipras, met with the IMF and also gave a speech at the quite conservative Brookings Institute. And while in Germany, he met with the leading banker Asmussen. And the bad thing is, after those meetings, he announced that there is a common ground and showed, in a way, what he means by dialogue and negotiation with these organizations. On the whole, Syriza seems to find more bridges with the inspirers of the IMF politics than with the struggles, hopes, and expectations of the people who fight. Just yesterday, I've seen that on internet, there was a member of parliament of Syriza, his name is Tatsopoulos, that gave an interview that proposed a government with Syriza and PASOK. That's not representative of Syriza, but it's one of their members in parliament. Secondarily, regarding the movement and strike, its turn towards the right on economic policies has really affected its attitude within the movement. I think there is a crucial example. Is the attitude of Syriza unionists during the strike organized by the teachers on the May examinations. The teachers responding to the thousands of redundancies and of educators and the closing of schools had want to decide to have a continuous strike. During that period, the most massive general assemblies took place, with more than 20,000 teachers participating and deciding a continuous strike during the exams, even though the government had decided the conscription of strikers with military orders to return to work in schools. But instead of the left leading this fight all the way to victory, Syriza trade unions in the leadership of the teachers' union decided the suspension of the strike. But in my trade union also, the Federation of Hospital Doctors, which is under the control of Syriza, even though the government has cut down on costs for health and our salaries, has closed down 9 hospitals and now is preparing for closing 40 more. Our union leaders don't seem keen on organizing a fight with a continuous strike. To be more precise, the answer of the closing of the first 9 hospitals was 2 4-hour stoppages. And even when in September, teachers went on a continuous strike and called out all workers for support at a common fight, our leaders still refused to join that fight with the teachers. But also on the level of the anti-fascism and the battle against Golden Dawn. An obvious example of Syriza's attitude is that on the 25th of September this year, only one week after the murder of Pavlo Fissas, an anti-fascist singer, by Golden Dawn, that day, unions had decided an anti-fascist strike, and 24-hour strike, anti-fascist strike, and then demonstration. But Syriza refused to march along with all the rest demonstrators up to the Golden Dawn headquarters. That demonstration numbered 50,000 people, was the most massive anti-fascist demonstration of the latest years, and have forced the government to arrest leading members of Golden Dawn. I'm sure you all have seen the picture of that bastards. But even when, 2 days later, the government decided to release 2 of them, two of the leading members. Alexis Tsipras rushed to state that he trusts the Greek justice system. And how could he state otherwise, when at the same time, when thousands were demonstrating in every neighborhood against Golden Dawn, he was, by visiting the president of democracy, appealing for a coalition of forces within the so-called constitutional arts. That meant a coalition with New Democracy and PASOK. That means a coalition with the memorandum government parties whose racist politics opened the way to fascists and whom they protected and covered all these years. But also in the field of anti-racism. Yesterday morning, 12 immigrants from Syria, refugees from Syria, were found dead. They got drowned in their effort in their try to reach Greece. Among them, there were a 3- and a 6-year-old child. It is, and so, when the government builds concentration camps in Athens for immigrants, build electrophorus fences at the frontiers, and drive immigrants to death, then the answer from the left should be legalize of all, without terms and conditions. Should be open the frontiers for the immigrants and refugees. But Syriza don't say that. It is obvious that Syriza, even though it has the words radical left in its name, and is as such known in Europe, is in fact reformist left, with all that this implies. And I want to point out that one thing that implied of this status is that the leadership and the rank and file of this party are two completely different things. That the proper attitude towards such parties is the common fight, along with the voters of this party, who, in spite of the betrayals of their leaders, continue the fight to overthrow the memorandum politics. And these battles we gave, and we will give together, in every workplace, in every neighborhood, in every school. We totally disagree, as SWP back in Greece. We totally disagree with the sectarian stance of the Communist Party, the other left party in Greece, a Stalinist party, which denounces Syriza as opportunistic, but refuses to support the fights against this government and these policies, and stands therefore against the fights of the workers. But let us be clear. If in the next elections Syriza becomes government, we will celebrate. We are going to celebrate. A victory of Syriza against the memorandum parties will be further proof that people are radicalizing and turning towards the left. It will be a victory of the people against memorandum forces. But we have no illusion as to what such a government can achieve. That is why we need an alternative. And we are fighting to bring down the New Democracy PASOK government that imposes terrible austerity and hardship on the workers. And this is very realistic, as we have brought down 3 governments the last 4 years. But at the same time, we are also building our own alternative, empowering the anti-capitalist left, the Socialist Workers' Party, and the anti-capitalist coalition, Adersia. I want to give you some more clues about Adersia. In the last national elections, Adersia got about 1%. And in the previous local elections, Adersia got about 3%. That was 100,000 votes. That's the biggest number that anti-capitalist left ever had. And after that, we have elected local councils to all of the big cities in Greece. But if this looks small compared to the 27% that Syriza got in the national elections, I'll give you the numbers to explain that in the trade unions things are quite different. For an example, next week is held the National Conference of Public Sector Workers in Greece. There are going to be about 500 delegates. Adersia has 70 to 80, Syriza 90 to 100, and KKE 50. So with these numbers, I want to say that in the basis of in the trade unions, Russia is making a lot better, much better than in the elections. So the struggle continues back in Greece, and we're building a strong revolutionary and anti-capitalist left to lead it to the end of capitalism.
And he's collecting a petition, and he's also raising funds for 3 members of the Socialist Workers' Party in Greece who are being sued for defamation by a Golden Dawn lawyer for something they've written in the Socialist Workers' Party. So this is potentially something that's going to cause them at least a huge amount of money in order to fund their defence. So George is raising money for the defence campaign for those members. So if people see that, hopefully they can contribute to it. So I'll bring Kieran back.
Okay, I think first of all we're very privileged to have a speaker from Greece, and then tomorrow Samuel McGee from Egypt, because these 2 countries really are at the forefront of the battle against capitalism, and a lot of the issues that are raised, particularly about the issue of Syriza, are issues that will affect us all in the future. And therefore it's important we have a very open and serious discussion about the tactics facing the left. First of all, I want to argue there are 2 movements happening at a global level. First of all, there are significant breaks by workers from old-style Labour parties, social democratic parties. If you take, for example, Germany. Germany was one of the most stable countries in Europe for decades. The SPD was a mass party of tens of thousands of members. And when you get a break in that party and the formation of Die Linke, the left party, that is a major change in German consciousness and indicates that workers are looking for the left. And what essentially the mood of many workers in Europe faced with a crisis is that we're not necessarily confident to fight for ourselves, but we want a real government, a government that is not just like these are Labour Party governments, but a real left-wing government to fight for us. That is fantastic progress. That is part of the development of working class consciousness, and we have to relate to that. But secondly, there's a different movement happening, which is a movement within, if you like, the revolutionary left and within the radical left, who faced with, if you like, frustration over the last 6 years, that there hasn't been the level of struggles and so on, have begun to rethink left-wing politics and in many ways revive the idea of what I'm going to argue is left reformism. And that argument, if you like, means that people pose the question that the task of the left is to get a left government, to build a broad party to get a left government, and that in itself will create a moment which will usher in the change to a different type of society. Now, in making this argument, the sort of people making the argument often return to, funny enough, debates that happened in the 1970s and the early 1980s. People like Ralph Miliband, Poulantzas, André Gortz used terms like revolutionary reformism, we must fight for structural reforms that can, if you like, bring about a real change by using the parliament. And that's really the argument I want to argue against, and I want to argue for a revolution on that. So therefore, the point we're making here is that it's important to support a government of Syriza. We're for that, absolutely. We'll support any left government's power, but we want to do so from the outside and take an independent and critical stance, because we want the revolution and the revolt to move further. What are the propositions of those who argue for revolutionary reformism at the moment? It is, first of all, that the debate, that, if you like, the big split in the labour movements in Europe that occurred in 1917 between, if you like, social democracy and the communist movements, that needs to be in some ways repaired again. That we have to get back to it. I mean, we often forget it now, but there were social democrats in Europe before 1917 who did think that if they get into government, they could end capitalism. Their aim was not just to manage capitalism, but to end capitalism. So this view thinks we can get back to that type of social democracy. Secondly, it argues that if we put in leaders into the government, to quote Miliband, with vigour and determination to bring about the change, you can use the parliament and the state to bring this about. Thirdly, it is argued that with both the vigour and determination of the leadership, this has to be backed up by extra mobilisations. So the modern idea of left reformism is we put in a serious left government and we have mobilisations on the streets to back them up. And through this, we can, if you like, create an opening that will lead to the end of capitalism. Now, that has an enormous appeal on the left, and we argue, for example, that last year there was on the international left what we call Syriza mania. The sort of criticism that, if you like, George has outlined here were hardly heard on the left. People thought we must build a Syriza in, for example, Ireland, in New York, any part of the world. This is the way forward on the left. Now, what is the problem with this argument? The first problem with the argument is the question of who exactly is going to bring about a change in terms of capitalism. And in terms of left reformism, the agents of change, the people who are going to do it, is the parliamentarians. People in the parliament will play the leading role, and the working class will play the backup role in supporting them and pushing them forward to bring the change. And, I mean, basically, I just want to put a very simple argument I learned many years ago from Lenin in his pamphlet, State and Revolution. It ain't going to work for a number of reasons. First of all, the state is a hierarchical institution. It's completely hierarchical. Look at the way the civil service is organised. Look at the Department of Finance. The Department of Finance in Ireland is run by a guy who worked for Zurich Capital Speculators, now becomes the Secretary General of the Department of Finance. He works through a massive hierarchical organisation, and they in turn dictate and push for certain policies. The state is a secret state. We live in a time when people are told you can have transparency and openness and so on. In reality, we don't even know what is discussed inside the cabinet. It is under the Constitution. You cannot reveal what goes on in the cabinet for 30 years after it occurs. We have no idea what goes on at the top of the special branch, no idea what goes on in the deep echelons of the revenue commissioners and so on. There's a huge degree of secrecy in this state. This state is populated by people who are drawn from the upper classes. I mean, look at the judgment in Sligo, where, you know, people for decades had a right to walk away. Two yuppie barristers from Dublin buy the massive Lissadell house, and a judge in the Supreme Court says, OK, they have a right to lock out the people, that they have no right away. How could that happen were it not for the fact that judges are drawn from the upper class? And lastly, and crucially, the state is, people like Poulantzas argue, the state is a massive institution which is a site of class conflict and so on, and no doubt the state moves into the education and health and so on, but at the core of the state are repressive institutions. The sociologist Max Weber, the one thing he got right and agreed with Marxism on, a state is about control of a monopoly of violence. It's about who can wield violence, and in order to wield violence, our people will run the police and the army and so on, right? Now, all of these sound very theoretical, and they are, if you like, part of the kind of canon of what's called Leninism and so on. Unfortunately, what has kept me as a revolutionary for 30 years has been a searing experience of what happened in Chile in 1970, when people ignored these particular lessons and thought genuinely and tried to implement the idea of, if you like, a shift from capitalism via the state. The Allende government was the first Marxist government elected by 38% of the vote in 1970 in Chile. That government was elected on the basis, first of all, of having a majority, a bigger majority than Maggie Thatcher, for example, at the time. Chile was not a country. People think, Latin America is a country where coups happen all the time. The secretary of the Communist Party in Chile at the time, Corvalán, said, there has never been a more democratic country where coups do not happen than Chile. And by and large, he was correct on the historical record there. This was a standard bourgeois democracy. Allende, in order to come to power, had to sign a constitution. That constitution indicated he had to respect the rights of private property, he had to respect an independent judiciary, staffed by the same sort of people who make rulings like we saw in Sligo, and he had to, if you like, accept that the army would have its own hierarchical structures and so on. Now you look at the tragedy of Chile, and the great tragedy of Chile was that in about 4 months before the coup, Allende was told that, if you like, a coup was being prepared. Rank and file groups in the sailors and so on warned Allende that a coup was being prepared. What did Allende do? He's then faced with an enormous choice. Given the fact, just imagine it, Richard Boyd Barrett leading a left-wing government, he's up there and so on, he's told a coup is happening. What is the obvious thing you would do? The obvious thing you would do is you'd open up the armories, you'd arm workers, you prepare, if you like, for defence of our class against the barbarity that would be witnessed on our class. What did Allende do? Allende invited into the cabinet Augusto Pinochet. Pinochet was in the Allende cabinet. And in a sense, what could he do? He's stuck in the structures. I mean, I'm not excusing him. He's stuck in the structures. He signed up to the state. In order, in any sense, to move things forward, he'd have to break the actual state completely. And therefore, this idea that you can use the state to bring about change, in reality, thousands of Chilean socialists have paid for their lives in blood with, if you like, that illusion. Now, could it be different if we could, if you like, have a left government which is backed up by serious mobilisation, which has workers, if you like, occupying factories, which has, if you like, people taking to the streets, pushing the government forward, giving them the courage to face down the rich? And the answer is, well, to some extent, they would force the rich to retreat. I mean, if you could think of a left-wing government, a serious left-wing government, that has, if you like, a real militant working class behind it, they would force the working class, they would force the rich to make some retreats. They would maybe allow us to have a higher minimum wage for a period. They would allow us to, they would throw us a few heads. The guy who's now the Department of Finance, maybe we'd get away with sacking him. They would make some retreats. But what they will not retreat on is keeping the core of the state together. The absolute core, the army, the police force, their control over the media. They will never retreat on that. And therefore what you gain, you also face certain costs. And really, one of the costs is in an emphasis on extra-parliamentary mobilisation, supporting a government, you get into the situation you have, for example, in Bolivia today. I mean, Bolivia is an interesting country. An uprising against water privatisation, 4 years of near-insurrectionary demonstrations, massive struggle in Bolivia, and then it is channelled into the Morales government. People are told you don't need to keep the fight up. You can understand why people would go along with that argument. After 4 years, it's channelled into the Morales government.
Okay, first of all, a statement about the general condition of the movement back in Greece. I think that we had passed from strikes that say we don't agree with the policy, so please stop it. From strikes that demands from the government to strikes that say we don't care what we are going to do, we're going to stop you and your policy. And there were some sectors, worker sectors, like the steel workers, or the ERT workers, or the teachers, or the subway workers, that went on strikes for more than a month, continuously. But about the revolutionary status, we are definitely not in a pro-revolutionary status in Greece. But we have seen some very, very significant examples of what the workers are able to do. The first one, it was back in the 2010, and the continuous strike of the steel workers is there when we found out that there is a great worker solidarity in Greece. There were, a lot of trucks, and I mean trucks, big trucks, with food, and a lot of money, and a lot of clothes that were collected all around the nation and sent to the strikers of the steel workers to support their strike. And in the ERT, on June, government decided to close ERT in a night. And they thought that as the media is not very, is not, workers don't have a good, don't feel good about the media, that the workers will not support the workers of ERT, and it resulted in the exactly opposite. More than 100,000 people in a few hours, and that was organized by none, was outside the ERT headquarters supporting the occupation there. This occupation was a second example for us. It was an example of the workers' control, because they don't just occupied the headquarters. They broadcasted their own program, their own TV program, their own radio program. They opened media to everyone that was fighting in Greece. I've given more than 5 interviews broadcasted all right about racism, fascism, and trade unionism. And just the last week, the police had made an invasion in ERT and reoccupied ERT after 5 months. And but this is still an open matter. When I was traveling here on Thursday, there was an almost general strike that demanded that ERT should return to its workers. Another thing that happens now in Greece is that the employees of the university, not teachers, the administrator employees of the university, are in their 9th week of strike, continuously, 9th week. And for example, the University of Athens and the Technical School of Athens hasn't opened from September due to this strike. It's a very strong strike. So about why we didn't participate in Syriza in the past, now in the past. Syriza was built before Dersia. It was built, I think, at 2001, 2002. And we didn't take the decision to participate because it was built as an anti-neoliberal front. The main issue was that we don't have to fight capitalism. We just have to fight neoliberalism. And at that time, we have shown the rising of the new anti-capitalist, the global anti-capitalist movement. And we took the decision to build Adarsia, and that wasn't an easy decision. In Adarsia, there are more than 10 organizations, from Maoist, partial Stalinists, and Trotskyists. That's very difficult to do, and we have made it. You're asking. I think you're asking about. You're asking about an advice. I think one thing that I wanna point is, it wasn't the creation of Syriza that inspires workers to fight. It was exactly the opposite. It was the fight of the worker, the strikes, the anti-fascist movement, the anti-racist movement that gave votes to Syriza. So the advice is very simple: empower your labor movement and empower your workers. To have an example of Syriza of the past, when you here in Ireland voted against the Euro Constitution, the member of parliaments of Syriza then didn't vote in the parliament, the Greek parliament, against the Euro Constitution. They didn't vote yes, but they didn't vote no also. So if Syriza is prepared to fight the capital, no, I don't think it's prepared. It's not prepared to break the memorandums. It's not prepared to show Troika the way out. They say that they are going to negotiate, and I'm very curious. How can a victim negotiate with their murder? That's not the kind of negotiation. So, to close it up, I would like also to remind you of the Chile of Alientes. It is, I think we all have to nowadays, and in Greek we have reprinted a book about Chile. We all have to go back and read the experiences from that period. But in comparison to that, in Greece, there is not only the reformist left. There is a left on the left side of the left. That is how we called it back in Greece. A revolutionary left, and SEC and Adersia are keystones of this left. And I think that the need in Greece is for a left that will fight clearly for the unilateral deletion of debts. and memorandums, and not negotiation. We need for a left that will fight for the nationalization of large enterprises with workers' control, as the ERT workers did now, not in the past. And we fight for a left that wishes to lead workers who will stand against fascism and racism, who will demand legalization of all immigrants without terms and conditions. A left that wishes to lead workers to battle against memorandums and governments with continuous strikes and occupation, as they already are doing. And that fight against capitalism, we're going to give it with the voters of Syriza, and with those who didn't vote for Syriza. It's a fight that the whole working class has to do. So let me tell also some words about the prosecution. 3 members of the Greek Socialist Workers' Party, SEK, are to appear in court on the 12th of December. They are accused of defamation by a lawyer who is in the payroll of a Golden Dawn Member of Parliament. Katerina Thoidou, Tasso Anastasiades, and Panos Karganas, the editor of Worker Solidarity, are to stand trial because articles in the paper exposed the neo-Nazi-inspired campaign against the right of second-generation immigrants to Greek citizenship. The lawyer in question is named Ioannis Andriopoulos and admits that he has worked for a Golden Dawn member of the Greek Parliament. At a time when a number of Golden Dawn members are in detention for their role in running a criminal organization that is involved in the murder of Pavlos Fyssas, this trial of anti-fascists is an outrage. It is a part of an attempt led by the government to paint the left as the other extreme. So, I would like to invite you in my stall to sign our petition, to support us in any ways, financially and in any ways, or the weekend. So, come.
Thanks, George. 5 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, in September 1973, there was a massive demonstration through Paris with the slogan, pardon my French accent, vote à gauche, mais prends ton fusil. Vote left, but hold on to your guns. Thousands of people were shouting that as, if you like, they watched the horror of the torture camps being set up in Chile. And I think the attitude is absolutely correct. In other words, you vote left, it's not about getting guns, it's about and hold on to working class militancy and working class self-organisation. And that's, I think, the essential point we're making to a generation of left-wingers who, because of the length of the crisis and the difficulty, to some extent are lowering their horizons and are forgetting the lessons of places like Chile. And I think that the essential point we've made here is it is possible for sincere and genuine left-wing politicians to take the government. They'll give you the government because they have to play by the rules of their democracy. They will never give you the state. They will never let you control. It's like getting you can be on the front stage of the Abbey, but you don't get to write the script, and you certainly don't get to be the director. And that's what happens in terms of our democracy. And therefore, we have to be aware that we will support that government, but crucially, any left government, we have to stay independent of it. Now, I just want to raise a few points from discussion. Is it absolutely necessary in 21st century Europe, Japan and America to go through the stage, first of all, of a left government in order to move forward? I mean, as Kieran put it, is it a necessary condition for going forward, even if it's not a sufficient condition? And the answer is, I don't know, is the answer to that question, right? We know there has been revolts, for example, in Paris in 1968, which wasn't an example of a left government moving, and in fact the whole attempt by de Gaulle was to derail that movement by bringing it in and having an actual general election. So it is quite possible you can have uprisings without having a left government. The last, if you like, major attempt at revolution in Europe was in 1976 in Portugal. Again, it wasn't premised on the issue of a left government. It was premised on the issue of, first of all, a massive revolt in the army, the breaking up of the Portuguese army, the formation of rank-and-file soldiers' committees. People often don't believe this at this stage. People marching around Lisbon with the red flag, and it wasn't built on the question of a left government. So the answer is, what is the scenario of how we move to change? It is possible that you can get a Syriza type situation, left government, but it's also possible that revolts can happen in other ways. The key thing is our attitude to it. And I think the point we've been stressing here is the need for independence of revolutionary organisations. Now, what does that mean in practice? And here, I think one of the things that's feeding into the mood for, if you like, a left government and a sort of a more a left reformist perspective is a certain mood of pessimism about, is it really possible to have revolution in the 21st century in Europe? And we have to make a number of very general points on that. First of all, revolutions do not happen because people want a revolution. Revolutions by their nature are unexpected, and they often happen because people are driven by certain contradictions in society to taking action themselves to resolve it. That's what a revolution means. Therefore, in February 1917 in Russia, it is not the case that anybody planned it. It is not the case that anybody thought it was coming. It simply emerged from the crisis of the war, of starvation, and the mobilisation of women workers on International Women's Day. So revolutions are not planned, they arise out of certain conditions. The revolution in the 21st century in Europe or America will not be the same as the Russian Revolution. So therefore the attempt to caricature, and even the term Leninist, you're a Leninist. No, I say I'm a revolutionary, right? I'm a revolutionary socialist, I'm in a revolutionary organisation. The idea that we're trying to simply hold on to, if you like, a page in history and follow the exact model, that is not what we're doing, right? What we are doing, however, is we're looking at some lessons, not just of Russia in 1917, but of Chile in the 1970s, of Hungary in 1956, which is this, that in every great mass upheaval, it is not the case that the mass of people sit back and watch their television. The mass of people become creative, they begin to form new organisations. In Russia they were called Soviets. In Hungary in 1956 they were called the Inter-Trade Union Committee. In Chile they were called the Cordones. Working people are tremendously creative. They will throw up organisations. This is not, if you like, a Leninist schema. It is something that happens from the nature of the struggle. And it happens because the only strength workers have is solidarity. We don't own the newspapers, we don't have all the professors on our side. The only thing you have is solidarity, and that comes, and when it emerges in big struggles, it throws up new sorts of organisations. That's one lesson we learn from the Russian Revolution. The second lesson we learn from the Russian Revolution is those forms of power, they won't be called Soviets. They're more likely to be called assemblies in 21st century democracy. There will be assemblies in any major upheaval in the future. The power of those assemblies, based sometimes in workplaces or sometimes in communities, will come into conflict with the repressive power of the state. The state will not allow its power to be taken away by mass democratic assemblies, and therefore it will come to a clash. And that's what we mean when we talk about revolution and, for that matter, insurrection. So the point I want to make then is that it's not about repeating the model of 1917, it is about looking at lessons in terms of dual power and the need for that dual power to be solved by the victory of mass democracy over the limited nature of capitalist democracy. Is that possible? I mean, here is where I just want to really tackle some of the pessimism to the left. We are living in an era, 10, 20 years ago, masses of people in Western Europe had a real enthusiastic belief in capitalist democracy. We had democracy, they had communism. People believed, we all were brought up on the Reader's Digest, Time magazine, we believed this crap that we had democracy here. You look around what's happening in the world today, masses, greater and greater numbers of people are questioning the political structures. There's a brilliant article written by, as it happens, a left academic, not a revolutionary, called Peter Mayer. He talks about the hollowing out of Western democracy. The elites increasingly are forced not to use democratic mechanisms. They want control from the EU, they want more independent central banks, they want city managers dominating, if you like, local councils. They are pulling back from the facade of Western capitalist democracy. And similarly, masses of people are becoming more sceptical about what they call consensus politics. And therefore, in that situation, the appeal of direct democracy, of democracy rooted in mass participation, is enormous. Is potentially enormous in a period of struggle. Therefore, we shouldn't be pessimistic about the possibility of workers throwing up new organisations in struggle. Last point to make, having said all that, what is the strategy of the SWP in terms of broad lefts at the moment? We welcome, we've been engaged in any attempt to build a broad organisation in Ireland. We've engaged with the United Left Alliance. We will engage further. We know there's a desperate need amongst workers to have an alternative to Labour Party, and we will engage with anybody on that. We don't think it's simply a matter of small groups coming together. As George says, it probably will emerge in conditions of greater working class militancy, the possibility of broader parties. But within those parties, we do not see them as the end goal. We do not see that as the end goal, that we're simply looking for a broad party where we balance the reformists and the reformists balance us, and we don't quite know where we're going. Our goal, and we make it absolutely clear, is revolution. We'll join and participate in those parties to engage in a friendly way to persuade people who are moving to the left, keep on going left further in order to have a revolution against capitalism.